to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. You know that I'm happy that you're here. Now, as you listen to the show, I get it, man, right? Change comes if we choose it. That's one thing. If it's thrust upon us, right, we gulp and we think, how am I going to navigate this? So to help you navigate your change and whatever that means for you, I have a free gift. In the show notes, you'll find my communication style assessment, which is relevant to our conversation today as well, one of my favorite topics. You'll get 2 reports after taking the assessment. One will show your natural superpowers of how you show up, more importantly, how your messages are being received by whoever you're speaking with. Flip side, we have blind spots. So your lowest score, you'll get a report for that, spotlighting that blind spot, which is really when we're communicating with people that maybe have opposite communication styles. More important to understand what that blind spot is and hopefully navigate change from there. Now, my motivational quote to set the theme or the vibe for today is by Theo Gold. And he says, communication is your ticket to success if you pay attention and learn to do it effectively. So it's got to be about 35 years ago, I was introduced to a communication behavior model. It's called DISC. Many out there, Myers-Briggs, there's a million out there. My personal and professional life, I have to tell you, changed forever after learning and using this particular tool. I literally became obsessed with communication skills, the psychology behind it, how humans communicate, the various assessments that were available, and how they all measured our natural communication strengths and, of course, those blind spots. Now, for me, being successful in sales for the past, 4 decades, really is because I think of that obsession with developing and then teaching communication skills to others, because sales is really about communication. Now, understanding how to communicate effectively will act as a magic wand for you, and I hope to change your life like it changed mine. So, cool topic, yes? Well, my amazing guest expert today is Steve Bunin. Now, Steve is an executive coach with network TV experience, using his expertise from an elite 25-year broadcasting career to help business executives in dire need of improving their communication skills. Is that you? He is also a 5-time Emmy winner and a 6-time Emmy nominee as a sports and news anchor. Steve is best known nationally for his 9-year stint at ESPN. He's worked in New York, Texas, Michigan, Arizona, and Washington, interviewing everyone from Justin Timberlake to members of Congress, covering everything from Wall Street to the Super Bowl. Steve lives in Seattle with his amazing wife, daughter, and 2 huskies. So please help me welcome Steve to the show. Steve, thanks for being on.
Thanks so much for having me. It is quite the honor, and I'm super pumped.
Yes. And such a background. And I tease, right? You're coaching executives on communication. And I laugh because I think we come up through the ranks, whatever career background we have. And I don't think communication is often a tool that we're taught as leaders, thought leaders out there in the community. We either do like I did, right? It found me, and then I just became obsessed with it. Or someone like you're in that industry of communicating, refined communication. So I think this is such an important topic for everybody.
Let's start first. I'm glad to get into it. Sure.
Yeah. And let's start first. Share it with everybody, that brief intro, but tell us how your career really did unfold for you.
Yeah. So I remember probably early middle school, 12, 13 years old. My mom says that I asked her at one point, what do you think I should do for a living, Mom? She said, you love sports and you love to talk. Why don't you be a sportscaster? And, she probably meant it as a throwaway, and I took it as like gospel, and it became my North Star, and it's all I wanted to do since I was an early teenager. So I was very driven to do that. Growing up in Seattle, I would go up into the old Kingdom, which doesn't exist anymore, and record myself doing play-by-play of the Mariners or whatever. We turn the TV down at home, and I'd be that guy who was, Charles Johnson, the runs of the day. Like, I wish I had the old tapes, but I don't anymore. So I was very driven to do that, and then went to Syracuse University, and then spent about 8 years crisscrossing the country in small markets. As you mentioned, New York, Arizona, Michigan twice, was in California, back to Washington a few times in my 20s. When I was 29, I got my dream job, which was ESPN, which is what I wanted to do since I was a little kid. And then I got to be there for 9 years, which was an incredible experience. And you sort of go from these small markets where you're trying to communicate stories that can be a 11-year-old weightlifter who she wins her division and she's going to nationals and the family's never traveled before, telling that story, compared to you're at ESPN and Justin Timberlake and Mike Myers are in the studio, promoting a hockey movie they did, or it's LeBron James or Danica Patrick or you name it. So I had this great small market experience and this dream network experience as well. Moved then to Houston, Texas, worked in TV and radio there, came back to Seattle, and then decided this is a lot of moving. And my angel of a wife had put up with it enough, and she's a doctor, and she said, all right, the next move is our last move. And I agreed. And that was back home to Seattle, where I grew up, where she and I met. And a couple months back, I just realized, it's almost a year ago now, I can take everything that I've learned that comes very naturally and easy to me, because I've learned it either the hard way, making mistakes on TV where people can, realize what happens like that. Or these days, or on ESPN, people tweet, I can't believe you said this, you pronounced this guy's name wrong. And then marry that with something else I had done all along the way, which was coaching and mentoring, primarily at-risk teenagers, big brother, big sister programs like that. And then coaching lots of different sports, not just my daughter's team, but other teams as well, high school basketball. And I thought it kind of dawned on me and clicked that I could put these two things together, this coaching and mentoring and teaching that I really love, with the expertise that I've earned from 25 hard years in a business that people might think, oh, it's easy and there's no problem and everyone writes things for it. And it's not like that. And I started meeting with different people who started pointing me in this direction of, there are a lot of people in business who are super accomplished in their field or in their niche. They've, as you mentioned, zero training in communications. And I thought, well, that makes sense. I don't know how to run a mortgage company. I wouldn't have the first idea, but I know how to communicate. And that translates through any industry. And I decided, let's see if we can make this a big career shift. And I have, and I'm thrilled about it.
It's so fascinating. Life, I think, is fascinating and exciting that we get these opportunities, if we allow them to enter our lives, where we can put those pieces of the puzzle and create something new that 5 years ago maybe didn't even hit your radar. So it's really, life is truly an adventure. And that is such a good example of what you've just went through, right? Living your dream, getting to the ESPN, and then, honoring your wife where she is with her doctor, being a doctor, building her practice. All of these things leads us to wherever we are right now. It's not good or bad. It just is, and honor where we are. Here's the next thing, Steve. So through that amazing career that you've had to date, more to come, right? Because you're not dead, right? So we have a lot more to come. Steve's still a young man, I tell you. What did you learn about yourself, or what were your biggest lessons along the way, which have served you and now you're trying to bring forward with others that you're coaching?
So I would say individually, perseverance. Broadcasting is a really competitive industry. There's just, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in Flagstaff, Arizona, a market so small that the market list, which is city sizes, so New York is number 1, LA is number 2, it goes down to 215. Flagstaff is so small, it's not on the list. So that was my career in the late 90s. It's okay. That was, I was paying my dues, making $13,000 a year. Great. Parents not thinking that the tuition was maybe worth it. But I got promoted. My old weekend sports job was available, and within like a week, we had 300 applications, resume tapes. There were VHS tapes back in the day that show up within a week. This is for a job paying $13,000 a year in the southwestern part of the country. These are people all over, and 5 minutes each. And that's how competitive it is for the lowest job in the totem pole. And it just goes. The pyramid it's very tough to climb. So I learned a lot about perseverance. I got hired and fired a lot. I moved 13 times in, I think it was a 7-year span from graduating college until I got to ESPN. And it wasn't like New York to Pennsylvania to Ohio to Illinois to ESPN. It was, across the country. I've driven almost every interstate in our great land, and had a lot of hard times and had a lot of blessings as well. And then again, got to realize the dream. So I learned perseverance on an individual level. And then I feel like I also learned that storytelling cuts through. Like, even making the transition for me after 20 years in sports to news, I feel like was way easier, because in sports, there's just a natural arc to a game, to an event, to a career, right? There's the struggle. It's Hoosiers, it's Rocky, it's Chariots of Fire. It's, any movie that has that beginning, the sort of turning points, maybe a mentor, whatever it is, and then an end. It's not always a happy ending, but it's some sort of conclusion to the story. And that translates into news. And I realized, as I was mulling this over, this career pivot, like, wow, actually that translates to a business executive in the C-suite where they've got 2 minutes to talk and they're just all over the place, or they're trying to get 36 pieces of output in there, and it's just the audience can't handle it. And one of the things, compressed storytelling is what we do in TV. And I realized, like, oh, that translates to the business world in a big way. Someone has 30 seconds or 5 minutes or an hour or whatever the time frame is, and they have to tell a story. It could be in a job interview, it's their career they're trying to tell. It could be the weekly budget. It's something that seems boring or rote, but they can make it come alive if they do it in an entertaining way. It can be informative, can be serious, can be light, can be a lot of different things. And that is something I think that translates, that I feel like I learned along the way in broadcasting that I apply now.
I think storytelling fast forwards the listener because they understand the concept, right? So in one of my workshops, I talk about the three little pigs and sales. And as soon as I get into the story, people are like, got it. Like, it's like a 2-minute story, but the concept behind it is so detailed, but you get it, right? Because we all know the three little pigs. So the storytelling, I think, is important. Lately, maybe in the past, I'm going to say 5 years, I've noticed that there's a lot about that storytelling, but I think sometimes it's taught incorrectly. It's like, tell your story, build that know, like, trust factor, but people get lost in their story and you end up losing the audience. So I like how you said, when with the news, right, you have to take this very complex situation, perhaps, right, and shrink it down into a 30-second bite that people can understand through that story or the way it's delivered. And I think we're losing sight that we're getting stuck in the story, but we're forgetting what the story is supposed to do. I don't know. Have you seen that or experienced that?
And I see that a lot in the clients that I work with. So, not all of them, but some of them, where they're focusing on the wrong thing. I call it like taking your eye off the ball, to put a sports phrase on it. Like, you have to, what is the thing? And some people, you could call it like the elevator pitch or whatever. If you had to boil it down to 5 seconds or 10 or 15 seconds, what is it? And it's sort of like in journalism, writing a headline, right? I don't know, president visiting Kansas. Like, okay, I got it. Now there's a sub headline. We'll be talking about whatever crime, so, okay, you really have to laser focus on what's most important. And the story is just like in a movie. It can have a slower buildup and a crescendo in the middle or at the very end, like Rocky, right? Or it can be like a news story, like an obituary, where the most important sentence comes first, and you're always imagining your audience is going to tune out at any end of a sentence. So the most important thing you say, and this was in resume tapes in broadcasting, you'd send out, like I said, these VHS tapes. I always told people that came to me for advice there, make the first 10 seconds great, because I ain't watching the whole thing. I have 300 on my desk. I have time for 10 seconds. I'll give everybody 10 seconds. And the same thing when you're talking, and you have to present any sort of information, I think in a business platform, is sometimes, again, you want that arc. Sometimes it's, here's point A. Is everyone on board? Okay. Point B is this. Everyone got it? Any questions? Point C is this. And then however much time you've got, that's how many letters essentially you get into your presentation.
Yeah, it makes sense. Again, it's being strategic and organized, but you have to know what to be strategic and organized about versus just getting up there and vomiting at the mouth.
And you got to be really good about self-editing. That's a really hard thing that I think for a lot of us do is I think about, I say this sometimes, like Steven Spielberg, the first cut of his movie could be 4.5 hours. He loves it. He did 1 million scenes. He understands that the audience doesn't have that patience, that time commitment. He might love every minute of it, and it's so hard to cut that. But eventually he'll compress it into 2 hours or 2.5 or whatever. And it's the same thing. I think that's one of the hardest things for all of us to do, is to realize everything that I want to say is not what they want to hear. It's like meeting your audience where they are and really synthesizing that message down into what fits them as well, more than what fits you.
Communicating's hard. This is a hard skill. It's not the one, like, you give me a tip and I go, oh, I got it, I'm perfect now. It's a reiteration. It's an evolution. It's trial and error and doing it again and figuring it out and watching the audience. And, it's complex, right? It's a very complex skill to develop. What are some of the common mistakes that you've been seeing, through your career, but even now as that executive coach? What are some of the pitfalls people are having?
So I would say over and under preparation. Some executives feel like, I am good. I don't need any help with my Zoom background. I already started $1 million company, and the background is it looks like the worst, high school, locker room, whatever, or they're all over the map when they're talking online. So under preparing is a problem. And then in terms of even like speech, over preparing. So you're thinking about it and you're writing 15 different versions, and then you walk into the room with literally like, the font is size 6, and you're reading off of the whole thing because you want to make sure you get everything in. You don't want to stumble. And that's a totally natural instinct, the fear of failure. You don't want to get out there and not have a script. But that's what I find is that you either have overconfident executives who say, I'm good, I will walk in there and I'll wing it. And there is a small percentage of people who can do that, no question. It's a very small percentage. And then the opposite end of that spectrum, it's like the bell curve. The other end of that line is I walk out there with my entire speech word for word for word for word for word. And that's not good, because then you're reading the speech and you're not connecting with the person, the audience, whether it's a boardroom, whether it's a conference room, whether it's an annual conference in front of 1,000 people. So I'd say over or under preparation, and then knowing how to do that. So, okay, well, what do? I can't walk out there with nothing. Steve said not to do that. And I can't walk out there with a whole script. He said not to do that. And so it's a combination of a couple of things. One is rehearsing it a lot, knowing your content. And then a bigger thing is deciding what works for you with bullet points, which is what I like to really push on my clients, or even having a script, but it's got to be big font so you can look down and look up pretty quickly, and having words literally highlighted in a script. Like I call it a punch word. So one word per sentence, where if you look down, you have one word to kind of catch your attention and go back up. And you may not get that sentence exactly right, but you'll know, oh yeah, we're talking about manufacturing, and you come right and you're back into manufacturing. Talk about that for a minute. Your mind starts to go a little bit. You come down, the next thing says sales. I need to tell you about what's going on in sales in Texas this year. So it's sales in Texas maybe is highlighted, but not the whole sentence. So I would say over or under preparation are probably two of the biggest things that I would say is a consistent issue. And then what we talked about, just eye on the ball, focus, understanding what the audience wants to know. You may want to tell them 10 things. What's the one thing they really need to know? What are they going to really walk away from this conversation remembering? That's important to be able to answer that question.
Yeah. Again, it's the preparation. Of giggling as you were describing the font being big. I had a speaking event. It was right before COVID hit at one of the stadiums here in New Jersey. And it was for one of my corporate clients. It was a big event. And I got up there, they all knew me, right? So I'm like, hey, everybody, if I didn't say hi to you, say hi to you later. And I go, so look, I don't have my reading glasses on. And I held up and I had just bullets listed.
Yeah.
I said, because I'm going to be in, I'm going to be out. You know me, I'm efficient and prepared, but look how big my font is. Started joking. And then literally I just saw the word and I knew what I wanted to say. I watched my time limit. I had my phone on. So you can pace yourself, but you have to practice it to be able to walk in and do that. So I was just giggling because as I age, Steve, the fonts get bigger and bigger.
They should. That's great that you did that. And people make that mistake. They think I shouldn't walk up there. No, you shouldn't walk up with a packet of 500 pieces. Nobody wants that. But it's better to walk up with 10 pieces of paper, in my opinion, and the font is big enough that you can quickly glance down and glance up. Then we've all seen this. You've been at a place where someone goes, and you can tell they've lost their place. Sometimes they'll say, I've lost my place. You'll lose an audience like that. And that's why in television, in those of us who have lived in smaller cities or worked in smaller cities and lived in small cities, you see that much more often, where the reporter is sort of nervous and looking for their script, or these days it's on the phone, compared to network reporters. They're live. They're not looking at the phone. They're not looking at a script. They know their content. They know I have 3 things I have to say. What happened today? What's the impact? Where is it going from here? And they may have something as a crutch, but they're not depending on it. Now, again, an hour presentation, that's a hard thing to go up with 0 notes. People can do it, but it's extremely rare. And you go up with those, whether it's on an index card, something you can easily move from one page to the next, or big pieces of paper, and you don't make any apologies for it. You're the one who's up there, and it sounds like you took the exact right approach.
Yeah, it's so funny. And the other thing I wanted to say, when I speak personally, right? Like I have the slides, and this is bad. And I work on this. So you're presenting to a big group and you have a set of slides, and I know what I'm saying. I'm so prepared and I have my stories. I know what stories I'm going to share. And then I look back and I go, oops. I forgot to advance the slide. And I go, well, if we have a power outage, I'm going to be able to keep going. So you make a joke about it. But see, like I have to get better at that because those visuals are important for the people in the audience. So again, right, we're always a work in progress. And I think that's an important piece as
And
well.
I'll give you a little tip that I used in TV, especially even at ESPN, was in the bottom right corner of any paper, as we're reading, as you're about to flip the page, I would put in your case, maybe I'd say, PP for PowerPoint, or so, just to remind you, oh, go to the PP. Or what I would do is whatever is next, so that if you're fumbling through the paper and if comes out of that, if what's next is we're talking about Detroit, then even if you're fumbling with the paper, you can say, one of my favorite cities. Now in your mind, you're just sort of stalling until you get to the next piece of paper, but you could say, who out there likes likes baseball? Ever seen the Tigers? They in Detroit? Whatever your message is, but you're trying to just stall until you get to your comfortable spot. And so either a little notation that says S for slow down, or if that's your issue, PP for PowerPoint, W water, Q ask questions, could be whatever works for you.
Love it.
But that's a good way to sort of get to the next page and make sure that you're taking a little bit of time to either breathe. Like I used to do that. As you can tell, I'm a bit of a fast talker. So I would put a little asterisk. It would be in the teleprompter. It's just to remind me, slow down, take a breath. Audience is not moving as fast as you are, especially in news compared to sports. Sports, things are moving. In news, it needs to be a little slower, a little more of a connection, especially if it's a sad or tragic story. There's so I advanced to the point in my career where I didn't have to do that anymore. But for a while, that really helped me get to pacing, which is another issue that I think people have when they are posting on social media or ripping through a 2-minute presentation and they're done in 1 minute. So how did that happen?
Yeah.
Because you didn't breathe.
Yeah.
You didn't let it sink in. I remember an executive at ESPN telling me that I was trying to tell all these jokes in a 30-second highlight. And he said, it's like a punch. Like you got to let your punch let it make an impact. You tell a funny joke and tell another one right away. There are, again, people who can pull that off, that sort of dry humor really quick, a bunch of jokes a minute, but it's pretty rare. It's a more effective way to say that joke, pause for a second, and then move forward. And it lets the audience, you can tell even there, the audience gets a little bit like they're edging towards the camera, like what's it going to say, leaning in. So that trick is very effective.
Yeah. At body language, I mean, when you were doing the broadcasting, you don't know the audience are in their living rooms, right, watching the TV. But if you're presenting live or even on social media group, even on Zoom, watch body language, because if you see people leaning in, you're like, okay, they're with me. If you see people looking down or leaning back, it's like, all right, I've lost them. What do I need to do here? What's going on? So and the other thing you said that I think is so important, especially as you're starting a new webinar, a new workshop or whatever, have those pauses in there. I do codes too. Like I put stars or something. It's just a code to me of slow down or whatever the cue is. But I think that's important, especially the first few times you deliver something, because you want to look at the audience and then after the fact go back and do those edits immediately, because it'll just make the next iteration that much better while it's still fresh in your head of what was actually going on live. Because it doesn't matter whether we think it was brilliant, what's landing for the audience or the client or who's ever in front of us. It's important. This is important stuff.
To remember that we've been on the end of that too, where how many webinars or conferences have we been at where the person is just not engaged, they're just reading, or the PowerPoint itself has 500 words on it. I can't see that. I'm in the audience 30 rows back. I say, 2 words, 4 words, big, bold type. Some things are different. Again, scientific conference, they've got to show certain, fine. But for the most part, the audience, we all have been there, and there's a way to engage the audience and a way not to do it. And those things that you're talking about make a big difference.
It really does. Let's talk about the chat GBT, right? It's impacting us, this whole AI, right? I feel like it's everybody talks about, which yes, I think we have to understand how we could potentially use it. But I also think we have to understand the danger of it cannot replace us in how we communicate. It's a tool to support, but you can't use it to write scripts and things because you lose personality and all those other things behind it. How important do you think the chat GBT, or what's your take on the whole chat GBT thing?
I think, like you said, it can be very valuable on the sort of macro level. I think the writing becomes even more important. It's your voice. It's your authenticity. It's who you are, differentiates you not only from everyone else, but certainly from something that mimics everyone else. So it can be helpful for something that I would say is more generic. a company-wide missive that it's sort of a company statement. It could come from an entity. It's not important that it came from the CEO or the
Right.
CFO. But if I'm the CEO of a company, to me, it matters what my employees think of me and how they feel like I'm communicating with them. And I don't want them to feel like, did some robot write this? Like literally or figuratively. And that to me is the danger in relying on Chat GPT. So if it builds your base, write a 30-second speech about, I'll just pick a hard topic, layoffs. If I've been laid off. If that comes to me from some generic statement, that is infuriating. If it has at least a hint of empathy and sympathy that can't be generated by a computer, that can be someone who was in the trenches with me, and okay, they're keeping their job, but I'm not keeping mine. At least they can look me in the eye. They can say that, right? And if it's written out, I feel like I can tell that it's come from the heart at some level. So that's just one example. But to me, even if it's not that adversarial of an extent of an exchange of communication, it's just so important to be authentic. It's what differentiates you from everybody else. And if you're relying on someone to do that work for you, you're not putting your best foot forward. And that's on both ends. That's not just CEO to anyone else. It's applying for a job. Think about when we talk to college kids. I've talked to a lot of college kids over my career. They all, they don't want to get to Sports Center. I say, not so easy. Got to move to Flagstaff, $13,000 a year. But you don't send the same cover letter to every job.
Right.
Because if I get the one in Brownsville, Texas, as in Zanesville, Ohio, both markets that I applied to and got rejected from jobs from, by the way. And I say, I can't wait to work at your station and cover all of your local sports. That's Chat GPT. Like that, yeah, that's a start. But if I really want to make an impact, in Zanesville, Ohio, I know that the Bobcats high school girls basketball program has won 6 of the last 8 state titles. I have covered girls basketball, and I can't wait to cover that team because I know they have a returning senior. You have to do the research. You have to make it your voice. So that to me is the danger. It's not that Chat GPT can't help you get a start. Maybe it is a good way to sort of write a cover letter to apply for a job in television. That'll get your start. If you send that out, if I'm hiring, you ain't getting the job. You got to appeal to me.
Yeah. Somebody said this to me recently, and I thought, oh, what a great way to describe Chat GPT. If you have lower skill, you're starting out, you've never written a cover letter before, right? So your skill is low, and that's not a judgment. Chat GPT could get you started. It could raise you up and get you into the right language. And then you do what you just said, kind of create your own scenario so that you can personalize it, but it gives you kind of the structure. The thing is, though, most of us, if like you, like me, we have a lot of experience. We're way high. So if we start using Chat GPT, it's pulling our expertise down to that level of mediocrity instead of pulling us up. So I think you also have to be aware of where are you in your career and expertise, and don't trust something where, you're light years ahead of it. Why would you use it? Again, use it as maybe a strategic tool to get your motors going, and then go in and say, okay, yeah, I see the structure. This is really what I want to say. But
Right.
I'd be careful, because we don't want to dilute what we really bring to the table, or expertise that we bring to the table. It's dangerous.
And I would encourage anyone who's at the beginning of that journey who says, well, yeah, but that does fit me because I'm 22 or 27 and I'm just starting out. Yes, it can give you that start, but the way you're going to cut through and make an impact, whether it's a job interview or again, presenting what my company has done in its first year of existence, it's got to be personal. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be you. So I would say, do not depend on that as your finished product. Great to get you started, in the same way that if you were, I don't know, learning to play tennis for the first time, you can just go out there and hit, and you can maybe learn a little bit, or you can Google but to have a coach who sits with you and tells you exactly what to do makes a big difference. And if you can use your voice, what matters to you, what the hard times have been for you, what you want to achieve, like that's what's going to resonate with whoever your audience is. It could be your boss, could be someone who's under you on the corporate ladder, could be someone you're trying to appeal to, could be fundraising. My company does this. It's we're trying to change the world in this way. What impact are you trying to make? You have to really be authentic, and I think singular. And it's just where, to me, you have to at least supplement anything you come up with Chat GPT with your own voice.
Yeah, I agree. Again, we forget that these are resources and tools. It doesn't replace, right, that personal, human, authentic piece of what, the vibe, right? That
And,
vibe, that frequency out there.
and I would just say this too, by the way, I was thinking about, as you mentioned, for people who have really, writing is not their strong suit. They're successful in business, maybe didn't do well in English or didn't go to college. It's fine, but I would say then it's important for you to invest in yourself. It doesn't have to be with me. I'm not pushing for me, but invest in yourself to learn how to write. It can be an online class. That's fine. But I would say, think about what the net gain is down the road for you to get 5% better at writing, or 10% better, or 20% better, and then work with a program or a coach or some entity that can help you get there. That's worth the investment. It'll be a short-term pain or a long-term gain in a big way. If you feel like look, ChatGPT is going to do better than I ever did, I'd rather depend on that, again, to a point. But after that, invest in yourself to make it so that you can accentuate that and then take it to the next level.
Yeah, it's all about the long game. And it's funny you say that, right? Because you as a coach, you've been mentored and coached through the years, right? You still have people that you're reaching out to that are coaching you right now, even with your stellar career. I have two coaches. I have a business coach and ironically, I have a writing coach. I'm really good at talking. Ask me to write it down. Where does the comma go? And I have an MBA, so it's not that I'm not educated. I didn't have an interest. It's not a natural skill for me. But
Right.
now at this point, I want to be truly a thought leader. I have to be able to articulate myself in writing now. I have been working with a writing coach for about a year. You have to understand that it's never done.
Mhm.
We're always growing and learning, and we have blind spots. And that's why I think it's very important that you said about a coach. I think if you are hiring a coach, whether it's Connie Whitman or Steve Bunin, I know I didn't say that right, but say it again. For Bunin, like Buick, Bunin. I know nobody knows what a Buick is, right? But if, we're not saying hire us per se, but if you think that you can coach others and not have a coach, personally, I wouldn't hire you because you have blind spots just like the rest of us, humans out here. So yeah, I love it. We're literally out of time. I'm looking at my stopwatch here. One quick last question, Steve, for you.
Sure.
How quickly, we're talking about this, communicating is complex, the human, the psychology and everything, it's all very complex. How quickly can people really improve their ability as it relates to communication? You're an expert in this. What do you think?
If you're committed to it, you can change pretty quickly with a couple of, I'll give you one tip, for instance. Most people on Zoom look at the person they're talking to. And if you see here now, I'm looking at you on the screen. And if I adjust my eyes, like in broadcasting, you look into the camera, or the acting, they say, look into the barrel of the camera, Hannibal Lecter, like they're looking, that's how they, right? That makes a big difference in how the other person is receiving you, how, again, thinking of your audience. So if you can commit to doing that, that can make a big difference in how you communicate on Zoom for the rest of your life. Actually doing it, practicing it with a Zoom with no one else, or a Zoom with your spouse or your kid or a loved one, where they're just going to walk away, but you're practicing looking into a camera when someone else is talking or when no one is talking. That is what's hard, is rehearsing it, practicing it. If you're talking about doing a speech, we talked about slowing down. Use your cell phone. A cell phone is a camera. Record yourself making a speech. Yeah. Look at it again. Play it back. Be critical. So you can make a big difference pretty quickly, but to make it a lasting difference, you have to rehearse, you have to practice, and to do that, you have to have, I think, a good coach to help you practice the right way. As an old wrestling coach of mine once said, it's perfect practice prevents poor performance. It's not just practice. Or in basketball, I coach basketball. If a kid is shooting a basketball like this, you can practice 5 million times. It's not going to go in that much. If a coach tells you how to shoot, the right way, that's how Steph Curry shoots, right? Once you know how to practice the right way, then you can really take off. So that's what I would say, is you can improve pretty quickly, but long-term, massive change takes a bigger commitment, like anything in life, right? The more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
And that's life, man. It's always evolving and changing and learning to pivot, but also realizing that we have blind spots, right? And that we have to grow. It's so funny. I recently was talking to my brother-in-law, and I sighed, and he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, the older I get, the more I know that I don't know anything, right? And we giggled about it for a second. And he goes, "My friend, that is called wisdom." And I said, "Yeah, I guess that's right, because you know that you don't know things, and that when you can honor who you are, where you are, but realize I don't know everything, and I'm never going to know everything, and humble yourself to that fact." All of a sudden, I think we learn more, learn faster, because you realize you have blind spots. So you're open to it. And the other thing I just wanted to say before we end, your nugget of like looking at the camera. So in my screen, you're down there. Notice the entire time you and I are looking at the cameras. I could see you moving like you're nodding your head right now because I have peripheral vision, but I'm not looking down at you because it disengages from anybody who's watching us on YouTube, that they feel that we're really speaking directly to them. It's these little things, these little habits. If we can implement them piece by piece by piece, all of a sudden the trajectory of how we're showing up or being perceived, it comes out to be amazing, but you have to put the effort in. So well said, my friend. Steve, thank you so much. We're out of time. Any last little tips you want to give us?
I would just say it's important for people to understand how important communication is. It's in any industry, at any level, speaking up, i.e. to someone who's higher up than you on the corporate ladder, or speaking down to a subordinate, someone who works for you, someone on your team. There's different strategies in how that communication exists. Different strategy communicating online than in person, different at a seminar, different on a panel. There's different types of communication that are, for some people, different parts of their job. And as you said, it's important to kind of have humility and recognize where your strengths and weaknesses are. And the ones that are strengths, great, be with you. If they're a weakness, have the humility to identify it and find someone, doesn't have to be me, find someone who can help you get to the next level. I do feel like my experience in network television is singular and unique for the people who are out there doing this kind of coaching, specifying in communications. And that's what I feel that I can bring to the table. And the clients who work with me, I think would say that it's, somebody who's been in those high pressure situations, producer screaming in your ear, 30 seconds to go, we got to get back to the NBA finals. Like, you have pressure in your job, you have stuff on the line. You need someone who's been in that chair in a sense, that can help you get through it. And that's what I try to bring to my clients.
Love it. That it's great. And you're right. And we all need help. The one thing I do learn, Steve, you and I talked about this with you shifting, as a business owner, you need a team, you need people, because you said before we started recording, you said, I'm alone. And is this right? Is that right? And you have to, people want to help too. That's the other thing, who've been there. Right. And they'll give those tips. Like you just gave so many tips, right? Because of your experience. So people want to help. You just have to pause and say, what would you do with this? Am I doing this right? You have to have the humility and be humble to say, I don't know everything.
Because no one did this alone. I had so many people who helped me in broadcasting, the people that I would have never thought should even touch the phone when I called as a little kid or as an adult. And they did. And I just feel like you got to pay it forward and try to help other people, whether it's, for a career or just as an aside, just as to be a fellow human. Someone's, falls over on the road, you help them up. Does it stall your day? Sure. But we're here for each other. And I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I love you, my friend. It's so great hanging out with you. And I love another fast talker. Just a real quick aside as a giggle for everybody to end the show on a laughing note. When I train and we talk about communication, how many words can we speak per minute? And they all look and they go, humans or you, Connie? Because I talk so fast. I go, no, the average bear, not me, right? Because I talk faster than the average. I think you've got me beat. So I love it. I just love it.
You and I can have a fun time there.
It's funny, Steve, have people sometimes listen and they do 1.5 or 2 times. They're going to put us down to 0.5.
Pause. What did they say? Pause. What did they say? Yeah, it's a good lesson for the both of us.
I love it. Thank you again. And so here's the deal, and I will put all this intel in the show notes. If you have a question specific for Steve, please reach out to him. Trust me, he's amazing. He's a delight to hang out with and chat with, and very approachable. His email, steve@stevebunin.com. I will put that in the show notes. And also check out his website. It's stevebunin.com. Great information that you'll find there. If you have a question, please reach out to Steve. I'm telling you, his vast background and experience with communication might just be the ticket that you need to amp up your sales results or amp up your business. Or, if you're HR, maybe when you interview, you can interview better so you get better retention. Whatever the ripple effect is where you're coming from, I think Steve might be the answer. Thank you, my friend, again, for being on. Truly, truly a pleasure hanging out with you.
Thank you, Connie. So honored to be here. Had a blast. Would love to do it again sometime.
Anytime. You have an open door on my show, my friend. Thanks again. And I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together, no matter where you are on your journey of change. I truly hope my guests and I provide the tips, strategies, ideas, the catalyst for you to have the desire to move forward. Information is a beautiful thing. If you do nothing with it, simply information. Soon as you start applying it, trust me, it's like having a magic wand. Magic will happen on the back end. Action creates reaction. And that's where the change becomes a heck of a lot easier in your life. And that truly is my wish for you. Again, thank you for joining us this week. I hope you tune in weekly so that you don't miss an episode. I'm honored to have you here. You've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.com. Have an amazing week, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a million. Love you.